Member for Mildura.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I wish I didn't have to rise today to make a contribution on the VicGrid amendments. And like the member for Lowan, I spend a lot of time actually talking to members of my community. After last sitting week, Acting Speaker, instead of going to the Bush Summit like so many others, I drove home through the corridor that V&I West will run through. And I visited Birchip and I visited Culgoa. Now, those two areas, particularly Birchip, they are of the opinion that the Labor government's policy is divide and conquer, because that is what's happening. And if the member for Werribee wants to thinking about children and families into the future, maybe it's about time the Labor government started thinking about the kids and the generations of families that have been the stewards of the land through that corridor for generations, and the future that they are having ripped out from underneath them by way of this masquerade of energy reform, when there are other options. So when I went to Birchip last week, and we had many community members, and this has been going on, this is not something that's just appeared since this bill was introduced into Parliament. This has been coming for a long time, several years. When the corridor of V&I West was seemingly moved to the west for what the community, again, is of the opinion for political reasons only. That's all they can see. So when you are talking to these communities, and if the government had decided to consult on any sort of level that made these communities feel heard, they wouldn't have to protest. They don't want to protest, especially after a rain. Those growers would much rather be out there spraying and looking after that land that they have looked after and farmed for generations. That is their livelihood. And now they are going to have it ripped up for some sort of energy reform, and then they get made out to be anti-renewables, and it's simply not the case. All they're asking for is to be heard and to have other options considered. It's as simple as that. So when we talk about some of these amendments, these communities need more than a media release that the fines have been reduced from 6 to 4 points, $12,000 to $8,000. Big whoop. It's still a fine for not allowing public sector employees to enter their farmland by force. They can still walk on, and that does nothing to make mothers in particular that can be home, as I said last time, can be home for weeks on end with their children during cropping season and just have people waltz onto their land to start surveying for towers. It is the worst thing that these growers and these families can remember happening to their farms, the biggest challenge that they have faced. And Mallee farmers are the most resilient people in Victoria. They have been through fires, floods, droughts, and they come back again and again and again. And they rarely have their hand out. All they want is a hand up. My dad used to say to me, and when his parents came out from Italy, farming was all they knew. But my dad and his family have been saying for decades now, it just feels like the government's trying to put us out of business. And for a long time, I would scoff and say, don't be silly, why would they want to do that? You produce food for not only the state, the country, also other countries. But now I agree with them. It absolutely feels like this government just has so little regard for those that produce food and fibre for this state and put food on the table of everyone in this place, I agree with him. It just feels like utter and complete disrespect and disregard by the Allan Labor Government, who just wants to get to this imaginary net zero policy by any means possible, and by bulldozing through the communities like I visited last week in Birchip and Colgoa. And whilst I was in Colgoa, it was one of the biggest turnouts that I have seen for a mobile office. The amount of people, and like I said, these people don't want to be getting involved in protests. They don't want to be getting involved in, they are head down, bum up, get to work and produce what you need to produce and make a living for your family. They don't want to have to be involved in these discussions, but they are at the end of their tether. They are so incredibly frustrated, and they are scared for the future of their children. They are scared for the future of those generational farms that have been handed down through generations. They are scared that their kids will not come home to farm, and they won't, because the future is not secure. It's very evident that the Labor government are not interested in securing the future of farming families. There is, no, as well as all the red tape that farmers have to go through, the audits, etc., there is just no value that these communities can see for the agriculture sector in this state, and they are getting out in droves. I was having a talk actually to a table grape farmer a couple of weeks ago who has literally sold out and has gone and got a job. My father, in fact, at 73 years old, he has farmed his entire life, and now cannot make a living off it, and at 73 years old has had to go and get a full-time job because farming in this state is simply not viable. So when members on that side of the House giggle and laugh and be disrespectful for farming communities, think about that 73-year-old Italian man who's had to go and get a full-time job. Now, he's survived cancer twice and a stroke once. And that generational occupation of farming is no longer viable for him and has had to go and get a full-time job. It is disgraceful what the Labor government is doing to farming families in this state. It is disgraceful. And that's not just in broadacre, it's not just in irrigated horticulture. The absolute disdain and disrespect this government has for the entire ag sector at every level is felt by every farming community in this state. And this bill proves it. There might be some amendments and it might make a good media release, but this is utter disrespect. And what you are doing to families in this state is disgraceful. And I hope you sleep well at night.